journey started very, very early in my life, around age 2. I went through every program they set up for Indian children, through the BIA, which is Bureau of Indian Affairs, and the government. And so, like, when I say my journey started early, I was around 2 years old. The first program I was put into, or actually taken, which through these programs, a lot of them we don't have a choice. And we didn't have a choice. Well, we have choices now, but I was in what they call the 60 Scoop. I was taken, my mother belonged to a church, of organized religion church in Rapid City, as well as my auntie. And so I was in the 60 Scoop, where they would take Native children and adopt them out to white families. So through the Wesleyan Methodist Church, the pastor had this couple that they adopted me out to, which was Bill and Carrie White. How I remember their name, I don't know, but and they had a son. And as soon as they got me, I remember traveling to California, where I don't know, but I was sent back, and it wasn't a very long period of time that I was there. I was sent back to Rapid City on an airplane by myself. The stewardess was taking care of me. And when I got to the airport, my biological father and my mother were there. When I say biological father, I was born out of wedlock. My mother, who was Standing Rock Sioux and a Canadian Assiniboine, was sold off the reservation to her husband, which was white, for $60. That's how she came to Rapid City. And her husband was a truck driver. And so while he was away, my mother would go out and, have her fun. And so I was born out of wedlock. And near the city where I was from, we had one of the 3 largest SAC Air Force bases, Ellsworth Air Force Base. So the majority of male family members in my family are in the military, or were in the military. And so Arthur Bishop was my father, or is my father. And so that first program, like I said, I was sent back because I don't know why. I can only think that my father was in the military, did not sign any papers. He was Alabama, Coshada, and African American. And so that made me thrown into a whole different realm. It was bad enough in them days to be half-breed, that's what they called us, but to be part black and part native was another taboo. So, but I went, like I said, went through the programs. The next one that they started me in was, as soon as I got back, was a program through Ellsworth Air Force Base, a Catholic church that was there in the small city where I was from, and the Methodist church, and they put me in what was called etiquette class. I always say it was a show and tell, because they told me they was going to teach me how to eat and how to dress properly. And at 2.5, it was very hard. But I went through it. And I would be taken to the Ellsworth Air Force Base a lot of times with the military men's on their lapels, all those ribbons and stuff. I found it very fascinating. I don't know what it means, but I always focused on that. And there were the nuns and some of the other women at the Indian center that we had there was teaching me how to eat, how to chew my food, all about the settings of the flatware and the dishes, the saucers and everything, what glasses to use in what order. And when you get it wrong, you're corrected. I got hit many times with a ruler across my hands, on my back, wherever they could hit me. But it's how they was teaching us, the treatment we went through. And then I would be taken to the Ellsworth Air Force Base and sit there with the military men so that everybody could see how I had been trained and changed. When I was going through these different programs, I would come back to where my family lived. We lived in an Indian camp in Rapid City, and that's where I was born. I lived in a boxcar, and we had another house, a big house that I don't know who built, but they called it the main house, where my family would gather to eat. But that's where I lived, and that was home to me. We were right beside Rapid Creek. But they would take me out to the military base, and I would do my thing out there, and have people stare and watch me and see how I had been changed. And then when I would come back to the Indian camp, of course, when I was finished with the program, they would strip me back down, put my regular clothes on that I had, and take me back to the Indian camp like nothing ever happened. But I was changing, not because I wanted to, but because of what was being taught and how I was being abused to change. My family would say, "You're not like us anymore." It was very hurtful, but it was a way to survive. And once I made it through etiquettes, my mother and my aunties and them continued to go to the same church and everything. Now, in my family, there was at least 5 of us that were taken and adopted out in the scoop. I've since been able to reunite with some of them, which they don't know, or they hadn't known who they were, where they come from, only that they had relatives from the reservation. Right before my 5th birthday, well, a few months before that, my father was relocated. They had sent him someplace, restationed rather, and he told me he would come back for me, but I had never seen him after that. My mother was an alcoholic, and I used to see my father, my biological father, come and take her from the bars, you know, when he was able to come into town. So I grew up in a family with alcoholics. And I understand what she was going through now. At a young age, I didn't understand. My mother was also an Indian boarding school survivor. She and my uncles went to one of the first Indian boarding schools that was open in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And the more that you find out about the Indian boarding schools, you'll find out that was one of the first ones they opened. And while the children were there, they would lease them out to the farmers and ranchers around there for day labor. So they called it an Indian boarding school, but it was pretty much a day labor place for children, for Native children. And how they survived, I don't know. But my father was relocated. Right before my 5th birthday, my mother was murdered. And so once that happened, and me being an illegitimate child, and my eldest sister having a different father, the man my mother was married to basically threw my sister and I out. My mother and he had 2 biological children. And so for a while, I think they were safe with him, but I want to say he was very abusive. Verbally, physically, emotionally. He would molest my sister. He started molesting me. So when I got thrown out of the house, I thought it was pretty good. You know, I wasn't afraid. You know, and then I started getting passed around to my relatives. Cousins of mine that were married to military men started being my foster parents, and so that continued. For a good year and a half, I went to kindergarten in a public school. So I didn't think much changed other than I had lost my mother and I was being passed around. And in a way, sadly to say, it was probably a blessing because I had met relatives that were Native that I would have never known otherwise. I started going to the reservations. meeting family members and starting to really absorb and learn my culture through my relatives. And I got to meet grandpas and grandmas I knew I never had. And one of my cousins and her husband, I never forget him because he was one of my father's best friends. He was my foster father. And he and my cousin had taken me to a reservation which was called Cherry Creek, where I got to meet my grandma and grandpa. And I was left there with them. And so they put me into day school, and that was, I thought it was heaven there, you know. My grandpa would teach me how to go out with my uncles and hunt, you know. We would go, they taught me how to go out and hunt prairie chicken. When my grandma had said, we're gonna have chicken tomorrow, and I was like, okay, let's go to the store, where are we going? And my grandpa just smiled and he said, we're gonna take you hunting, but you have to be quiet. So it was a wonderful experience. One of the last memories I have of my grandpa and my uncles taking me out. And then, you know, my grandma taught me how to haul water, how to wash my laundry in the creek there, and you know, how to pick berries and stuff like this, because we were gatherers and we were hunters, and I'd never experienced that before. And so I thought finally I was safe. And my grandpa and grandma were never mean to me. They never called me derogatory names that I had heard, you know, from other people. They had treated me fair. And so, you know, I got comfortable. And I have to go back and tell you, when I was born, because I was black and native, they would bathe me in turpentine and lard to bleach my skin out. So when I was with my grandma and grandpa, that had ceased. My grandfather had taken me to the day school one morning, and he said, I will come and pick you up this afternoon, my girl. And so I remember going into the day school and sitting down, and I hadn't been there very long, and there were two men that came into the school wearing black suits and tie, and they were white. They were talking to the teacher, and I remember seeing her point at me, and one of the men came and grabbed me by my arm. Now, I was 6 years of age, a very small child. He jerked me up out of the desk, and the other one grabbed my arms, and he went out the door with me. Now, I don't know what was happening, and I know I hadn't done anything wrong, and so I couldn't figure out what was going on, and I know I was scared because they threw me in the back of this car, and we started driving, and I don't remember the trip itself until we came to a stop at this big building. There were several buildings there, but they opened the door, pulled me out of the back seat, and walked me up some stairs, and then inside up a corridor. And there was a woman standing there, and they was talking with her, and she come and grabbed me, and then they passed me to another person, a matron, and took me into this room that looked like a utility closet. And there they stripped me down and slammed me on a chair like this, like a little stool. I remember the matron grabbing the scissors and cutting my braids off right under my ear, and threw them at me. And they poured this stuff on my head that smelled like petrol, and she put a little container in my hand and said, hit the showers. Now, I didn't even know anything about what was going on. I didn't know where the showers were. I didn't know what was happening. There was a native student there, a girl, took me to where the showers were in the washroom. And I remember her just pointing and telling me, get in. And so I went in there and showered off what they had poured on me and what the liquid they had given me in this container. And next thing I know, she jerks the curtain open and says, get out. And threw the towel at me, so I wrapped myself in the towel, and she took me back to this room. And the matron was standing there, and she threw a t-shirt and a pair of panties at me, and told me to get dressed, and still nobody told me what was going on. And I remember telling her, I want my clothing back, I want my clothes. And she said, I'm going to take you downstairs and I'm going to teach you not to ever question me. And I told her, I want my clothes back. And so she took me down the stairs and down into the basement and threw me into this room where there were lockers, metal lockers, and then there was a cement bench seat that she slammed me on and told me to stay there. And I stayed there the rest of the day till it was night when she came to collect me. And threw my clothes at me and told me she was going to take me upstairs, and they took me up to the dorm room, and there were cots there and children lined up in these beds everywhere, and I could hear them whispering, you know, and she told me to get in bed, and I'll see you in the morning. And so that was the beginning of my Indian boarding school. Torture, it was torture to me. I thought it was a prison. And I stayed there until 5th grade, and then they sent me to another boarding school because they called me defiant. And they wouldn't take me at the one, but they took me to another one. And of course, when you're in the boarding schools, the first thing you have to learn is how to fight, because they will beat the crap out of you. I learned to make friends very quickly. And with my art, when I was at these schools, my art was what saved me. Once the teachers and matrons knew I could draw, some of the beatings subsided because they found a purpose for me. And believe you me, I used it too, because it meant less beatings, you know, less hitting, because they would hit us with straps, with rulers, backhand us, they'd hit us with anything they could, so that helped to subside the beatings. And I was there until I aged out, which was around 13 years of age. And so then they sent me back to Rapid City, where I was originally from, and put me out. So, and then again, I become awarded to the state there, which, you know, I start going with my family members again. So I went through 9 programs that the BIA and the government set up for me, and I ended up here in Dallas with the Indian Education Program. I went to college here and ended up working for Baylor. So that's how I got here. I'm a transplant. I'm age 21 and I'm 73 now, so. Thank you so much. And you know, my daughters, my eldest daughter is also Indian boarding school survivor. She was taken from me when I got here in a program. But she's an Indian boarding school survivor, and I'm helping my own children to mend because there's so much generational trauma. I didn't know how to love myself, let alone love children. But I do have 2 daughters and 2 sons. All of my children have some type of art in them. My grandchildren, I have a lot of grandchildren that are artists. So I'm very proud of who we are. But it's a lot of generational trauma. And so, you know, through my art, I heal myself. I try to share with others. I also, because of my father, I know Bishop is a slave name, but I love my father. I do what I call slave art in honor of my father. And in all my art, you will see turtle in the majority of them. I'm from the turtle clan, and so it's something I cling to. And like I said, I recycle garments, I design garments, teach sewing, you know, and any type of art that I know, I help and I share it to help all of us heal, regardless of nationality. People always ask me, don't you hate white people? No, that is, and it was a different time, a different era, different people, and I don't think I have enough hate in me to drag that around. You know, it's better to learn to love yourself and learn to love each other and share what you have. And so that's what I live by. questions or anything, I'm here to share,
We
you
have
know.
5 minutes for questions.
Mhm.
So we have about 5 minutes for questions, and then you'll be available afterwards
Yes, sure.
for more individual questions.
Yes.
So I know your artwork helped you, but I'm sure when you first started getting transplanted, you were very young, and so besides your artwork, what gave you the fortitude to not give up or just kind of melt away? Because it took a lot of strength to go through all of those things.
Yes.